The United States, the United Kingdom, Russia, Ukraine, NATO have all stepped up diplomatic engagements in the past week in a bid to de-escalate some of the tensions surrounding Ukraine and the Russian military build-up at its border. But the renewed dialogue does not seem to be producing any results. In the latest, Russian President Vladimir Putin made his first public statement in the ongoing crisis in weeks, saying that the West is deliberately creating a scenario of war and ignoring Moscow's security concerns.
Мы не увидели адекватного учета трех наших ключевых требований, касающихся недопущения расширения НАТО, отказа от размещения ударных систем вооружений вблизи российских границ, а также возврата военной инфраструктуры блока в Европе к состоянию 1997 года. Надеюсь, что мы в конце концов найдем это решение, хотя оно непростое, мы отдаем себе в этом.
Putin was referring to his own security demand that it had put before the US and NATO. Both the US and NATO have responded, and Russia is yet to reply back to Washington's proposals. We know that the US had refused Moscow's main proposals that NATO retreat its troops and weapons away from Russia's eastern border, and that it refuses Ukraine's bid to join its military alliance. Putin further accused the US of using Ukraine as a tool to achieve its real goal, which is containing Russia's development. Putin's comments came during a visit of Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who is one of Putin's few allies among NATO and EU leaders. But dialogue continues from all sides and at different levels. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Tuesday spoke to his counterpart Sergei Lavrov and urged Russia to immediately de-escalate tensions by withdrawing troops. Meanwhile, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson paid a visit to Kiev and met President Zelensky. Both leaders echoed similar messages, urging Russia to step back and choose a path of diplomacy.
It goes without saying that a further Russian invasion of Ukraine would be a political disaster, a humanitarian disaster. In my view, it would also be, for Russia, for the world, a military disaster as well.
Не буде, а буде, на жаль, трагедія, якщо почнеться потужна ескалація проти нашої держави. І тому я відверто говорю, що це не буде війна України з Росією, це буде війна в Європі, повномасштабна, тому що ніхто не віддасть більше своїх територій і людей. Дякую.
Despite the push for diplomacy, Western leaders have repeatedly warned Russia of severe consequences if it does invade, including wide-ranging and damaging economic sanctions. Britain and the United States have said that they were looking at targeting people in Putin's inner circle, including powerful business allies. For now, as Russian President Putin said, talks continue with the hope of finding a solution, despite it not being that simple. Let's talk more about this. Stuart Smith is joining us live from Moscow. Stuart, thank you for your time and welcome to this broadcast. Russia's President Vladimir Putin has accused the US of trying to draw his country into a war in Ukraine. And as Putin spoke, Boris Johnson held talks with President Zelensky in Kiev. Will these discussions by world leaders in Ukraine further dent the situation or even anger Putin?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I'll just add that the Prime Minister himself will be able to put those comments to the President of Russia today. Later this afternoon, he's likely to have a call with the President of Russia to say all of this to him in person over the telephone. And so this does continue the threat from the West, and notably the UK and the United States, that there would be incredibly harsh sanctions for Russia should it choose to invade. That telephone conversation will provide an opportunity for the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson to warn Vladimir Putin of the dangers of invasion, but will also be a chance for Russian President Vladimir Putin in return to talk about Russia's concerns that the West is using this issue for its own political purposes. The president accuses the United Kingdom and the United States of trying to inflame tensions in Ukraine, to escalate tensions. That's despite US claims that Russia is refusing to de-escalate by removing troops from near the Ukrainian border. Specifically, Vladimir Putin said Russia did not see an adequate response to its key concerns. And with that now said by the president, it's clear that in terms of what next steps will be, they will not likely be steps by which Russia considers this matter over. It clearly is not over. Russia has not managed to achieve what it wanted. The question is whether it uses diplomacy to try and create a suitable compromise, or whether it also involves military action. Russia, of course, has ruled out attacking any other country, including Ukraine. But before these latest statements, there were comments from the Foreign Ministry about military technical measures to be taken if agreement could not be found. And an interesting distinction we're hearing today in Wednesday by the French foreign minister, who is giving a completely different picture of the intelligence situation around Ukraine. He says that France is not considering an imminent threat of invasion of Ukraine, which is closer to the position of Ukraine itself, putting it on a very different footing to the United Kingdom and the United States.
Stuart, Ukrainian President Zelensky warned that a Russian invasion would not be a war between Ukraine and Russia, but a full-scale war in Europe. What measures is the bloc taking to avert this confrontation?
Yes, so notably Ukraine is not in the NATO military alliance. It's not part of the European Union, but both have been offering support, limited, but support in various ways. The European Union offering over $1 billion in funds for Ukraine to help support it during this very tricky time economically. NATO not committing to sending troops to Ukraine, but some NATO countries have sent defensive and offensive military equipment. Poland, the United Kingdom, the United States at the forefront of that. Also, the Eastern European countries have been sending equipment. NATO and the United States have ruled out actually helping Ukraine militarily should there be an invasion. But the point of President Vladimir Zelensky is that should Russia enter Ukraine, any other country could be next. And so NATO is taking precautions by moving troops to Eastern Europe, countries like Poland, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, which share a border with Belarus. That's notable right now because Russia is undertaking drills with Belarus, and so Russian forces are now close to NATO's eastern perimeter.
Finally, Stuart, even after calls for Russia to step back, are there any signs that the Kremlin will give in to some of the proposals made by the West and even reach a compromise? WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.